Hello, my name is Catherine Mossman. Today is January 29th, 2022. It's a little presentation that was originally done at our FIGU-Canada public meeting earlier this month. It's a slightly revised version for you who were there at the meeting, and hopefully you guys will find this interesting. The Codex, calculations to find our destiny partner and why it's not working so well for us these days. Early last year, I decided I was going to start reading all of the contact notes once and for all. And obviously, not something you do in a year on the Future of Mankind site. So this particular presentation or this subject matter, I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with and have read before, but it's always interesting to go back over these things. You always find little nuggets that you totally forgot that you read before. So here we go. This particular one is coming from out of the contact block 4 that Billy put out that went between August 8, 1980, December 31st, 82. This particular one is 1981, contact 154, December 4th. This is interesting because it looked into the calculations that Billy did to do with when we might meet our destiny life partner and what age this may occur. This is based on very interesting calculations of a cabbalistic nature based on your race, sex, your birthday and month, and even your horoscope sign is taken into account. So here we go. This came out of a discussion that Billy was having with Quetzal about a core group member and the ill-advised relationships she was getting into. This woman, her name started with the letter K, that's how she's identified, and seemed to be getting drawn into this by this person who was actually not her destiny partner according to Quetzal. So Billy says, "This is an issue over which I have been troubled for 2 days." And basically this predetermining destiny partners for those in the Codex. Billy, you recently told me that a member of the Codex goes so far in his/her determinations of his/her life for the next life that they even can predetermine at what age they can count on finding the partner, the real and true life partner. And you said that this would be the case for Kay in her 25th year of age. However, the whole thing really only applies to human beings who are interconnected to the Codex, which will expire in the coming time. However, that will be then forcing all predeterminations to then be cancelled for further lives, as the same is true for the years of life to be made up when a life ends too soon. If the Codex is broken, then the contract for the Codex bearers also falls, if no more making up takes place for years that were not lived long enough, since everything really only concerns members of the Codex. It is all not the norm. It will not all be the norm, I think is what he was trying to say. And here Quetzal just quickly makes this little reference to, well, in your book, Life and Death, Leben und Tod, it was stated here that years not lived in a life must be made up in the next life. So this does not apply anymore to human beings in general, but only to those who have incorporated themselves into the Codex, which will become effective, dissolved, and cancelled in the near future. However, as a result of the fulfillment of certain values. And yeah, this wasn't stated in this book, and they had to put out an explanatory note because people that have read this one, oh, well, how come this, that? Which was meaning that if somebody's life got cut short, they would, if they were in the Codex, the next life would be a short life to make up for, they say you cut off 10 years of your previous life was supposed to be 10 years longer, then you'd only live 10 years. Anyway, that's all null and void now. So anyway, just something interesting if you happen to start to read in Leben und Tod. It's not out in English yet. So a brief recap of what the Codex was. So approximately 389,000 years ago, several million Lyrans and Vegans again took off from their home worlds, got into the space-time configuration of our dimension, and came to Earth, where they mixed with the earthly human life forms. And they also created descendants in the normal manner, as well as through genetic manipulations by genetic engineers. This is all from Contact 251, a really extensive contact about all this going to and fro. The results of the genetic engineering produced beings that were part human, part animal, and included giants, titans, and other creatures. In the course of hundreds of thousands of years, these creatures were displaced once again, and eventually died out because they could not reproduce or because conditions for their life forms proved fatal for them on this planet. So this codex was formed 13,500 years before Emmanuel. Among the several million were 144,207 leader personalities and sub-leaders, etc., who ruled over their followers in a rather hierarchic form, and this might they also transferred onto the human beings of Earth, with whom they had come together to create descendants of various kinds. This is from the booklet Interview with Billy, 1988. These 207 leaders and sub-leader personalities were actually ringleaders, who were then decisively responsible for the fact that lots of misdeeds, irrational teachings, and irrational religions could come up and take root on Earth and amongst human beings. But these leaders not only brought terrible and erroneous things and misdeeds to Earth against their better knowledge, they also brought many good things, things of the handicraft, the philosophy, and the thinking, the medicine, and technology, among other things. Thus, this codex was, from now, about 15,522 years ago. All these fallible ones who had come to the Earth were unified at that time by an Ishwish, which means one who stands higher in knowledge and wisdom from the common man or from leaders, kings and queens, etc., and were taught all the necessary creational laws and recommendations as well as guidelines, etc., through which the fallible ones, in particular the 144,207,000 ringleaders, agreed to make good again for the damages wrought in later incarnations. As a side note here, for those curious about who that Ishwish was at the time, he was the first of three people named Henoch, who bore the Nocadamian spirit form, which Billy today has inside of him. These were all prophetic personalities with the name. It could have been Enoch too, which we have in our history, who had the same spirit form. Anyway, the name meant the wise man of time or the initiate. This particular Henoch was not part of the sevenfold lineage of the prophets that Billy is now the last of, but there was another. Henoch was one of the first, one of the later Henochs was one of the first of this lineage. So it was about 15,522 years ago from now that they created this codex, or this contract, for themselves and all followers, through which they should suffer from severest measures if they break from their oath of compensation and the thereof resulting mission. This codex has been created for all the future times until the day the compensation will be completed. And to find more about this, you can find that more in the interview with the UFO contactee on our website, and it's throughout the contact notes too. In the meantime, this codex has been fulfilled and is therefore no longer functioning, and this occurred in 1998. Codex, sanctions for those who broke their promises to themselves. So this is further on the explanation about should suffer from severest measures. It has been commented upon that this suffering from severest measures sounds like some kind of religious type of penance for those who did not follow through. However, as it was not a commitment made to a god, but a promise made to themselves in recognition of the errors made to make reparations for the havoc wreaked, it's basically a cause and effect scenario. Everyone has free will. However, in the case of those who are aware of the truth, but still willingly chose to walk away from it, they will suffer, quote unquote, in future lives, and that they will have a much harder time finding their way back to the creational truth. And in this other contact 158, a few contacts further, they are speaking about, I think it's Quetzal, who said, "Furthermore, I have to explain to you that now, in spite of everything, one sanction remains in force, as it was recommended in an advisory way by the High Council, namely, that during 7 successive incarnations, no contacts whatsoever take place with the group community," so that's the people that are part of the mission, "that consequently these lives are to be lived through among other peoples and in other circumstances, if an exclusion from the group has to take place due to malicious violations by these people once they've been with the mission and now they're maliciously violating it, or if this group member excludes himself or herself, or allows himself or herself to be excluded due to betrayal and mission destructive behavior, and thus due to a decision of her own in this respect. So that's interesting. Moving along. Every Codex affiliated human being already in the preceding life determines for the next life the time or age from which she could possibly meet their life partner, who really is the right one. So just reiterating what was said earlier. So it goes on here saying the destiny can and will be disturbed if the male or female Codex member does not hold to the determined time. So for example, if he or she already has this determined point in time, enters into commitments that are not according to destiny and that are thus wrong. Wrong thoughts, emotions, materialistic reasons, wrong lifestyles and environmental influences, etc., used to select an incorrect partner often set in motion deleterious cause and effect scenarios in one's own life. So continuing on, I believe it's Quetzal, such commitments disturb destiny in its flow because they are usually wrongly based on emotions, and they also proceed from wrong thoughts, causing a mental disorder to appear, which displaces those necessary swinging waves that should decisively attract the destiny life partner, even if this one belongs to another race and is tens of thousands or millions of kilometers away and has no direct material conscious knowledge of them. But the danger of the disturbance or even the destruction of these destiny swinging waves is presently very large due to the wrong lifestyle and the wrong environmental influences associated with them and so on. But above all, due to the fact that the lack of knowledge of the human beings in relation to the teaching and its impact, as well as to the causes and effects of thinking, of material consciousness, as well as of the workings of the subconscious and the determinations and the power of the psyche, usually lets the human beings act wrongfully, whereby they ignore their determinations and even destroy them in many cases. In other words, another way to say this is we're talking about affective love versus effective or true love. And unfortunately, this is what the majority of humanity now practices. So a quick recap of what affective versus effective love is. Affective versus effective true love. Affective false love is a norm on the earth. Billy, the earth human being is not evolved enough to be able to create true wisdom-based love within himself, herself. Only a few human beings on earth are on the threshold of this highest form of wisdom / creational love. It's from Gesetz der Liebe, or the Law of Love book, page 34. So Billy goes on to say in this book, the majority of humanity on earth still lives in the lower forms of false affective love. Is it any wonder then that so much goes awry on this planet if the very growth medium for our evolution is inadequate? And then I'm just continuing here to say that affective love usually has to do with the self-created delusions or fantasies of who this other person is based on our own projections, often to do with the material trappings, the looks, the shape of the body, the power, the money, the prestige, the fame, and the delusion that this person will fulfill all your wishes and desires and you'll live happily ever after. Billy goes on to say, fortunately, with enough striving and effort, we can actually begin to learn what love really is by observing the difference between genuine love and the false love, which is predominantly practiced on this planet. Affective versus effective true love. Concentrated observation is the key to decipher. True love comes from this fine spiritual perception of reality. Such a perception of reality comes from the respectful, concentrated observation and registering of that which is. Again, from Gesetz der Liebe, Billy continues. Effective love, it comes from perceiving at a fine spiritual level the nature of another human being, creature, or some other element or thing. So the knowledge and wisdom acquired this way through meditative concentration on the reality of a thing results in the experience of love. However, the ability to exercise such concentrated observation is something we Earth humans rarely possess, and therefore we must develop it through hard ongoing practice, often over a period of many years. Effective love travels at the speed of 10 to the power of 7,000 times the speed of light being about 300,000 kilometers per second, which can attest to why the swinging waves can reach out into the depths of space and reach other planets millions of miles away, or even light years away. The whole topic of effective versus affective love is huge, but this little synopsis here will serve to elucidate part of the reason that we so badly bungle our relationships. Further to note, in Gesetz der Liebe is another hindrance that we have created to hamper the meeting of our destiny partners, which means that different people cannot meet again during reincarnations due to the shifted laws of reincarnation for many millennia, and thus cannot continue to cultivate the love they once built up for each other. So due to the overpopulation, our reincarnations sent us out of phase. When we're living according to the natural laws, we are more likely to be living and dying, going to the other side, in concurrent waves, and thus more likely to be alive again with previous ones we were bound to in various relationships in past lives. Not the same people, obviously, but the spirit forms inhabiting them. So, Billy goes on to say, now they have to be content with meeting new people or only meeting one person from previous centuries or millennia with whom they can enter into a form of love, whereby it does not matter here whether it is a covenant love or a platonic love. So it is clear from this that the only reason why such a marriage cannot function well in the present time of human legislation on the human's destiny and life is that due to insane overpopulation, many people who had once truly joined together in an honest and reverent love of some form in earlier centuries and millennia cannot meet again and continue to cultivate their love. It is possible for people to meet again who were attached to each other in some form of love in earlier centuries or millennia through reincarnation, but at the present time, if they are already satisfactorily married, etc., unfortunately through the unreasonable creation of human laws, any further possibility of a new union in Platonic or covenantal form, etc., is denied them, or else, in view of the degenerated emotions of the people themselves, it is denied them. For example, if now, one day, a woman suddenly appears who in earlier centuries was in love and in alliance with the husband of a woman now, who he is happily married to with a family, well, of course, in both cases, the man's and the woman's, this love was not simply destroyed by the death at that time in their previous lives, but continues to exist and demands, according to the laws of nature and evolution, a continuation and further development. According to the law of creation, it is the simplest thing in the world for these two partners from an earlier century to join together again in a covenant. That is, if the woman is not yet in a covenant with another man and is therefore still single, whereby the age would be of complete unimportance, after which the man then would simply live with the two women in a marriage covenant. But precisely this will fail because, on the one hand, the existing human laws forbid it, and on the other hand, the woman who has already been married to the man will rebel against it in egoism and jealousy and in ignorance of the wrong legal demand of a single marriage, whereby the new union, which is in accordance with the law of creation, cannot come about, whereby the life of the newly added woman must automatically be disrupted, as well as the life of the man, and thus also his hitherto happy family, because the love that has already existed for centuries cannot simply be dissolved. So this takes us back to contact 154 now. So disturbance of destiny through emotional attachments, etc., and the resulting offspring that can come from these. It also happens that many wrong and not determined marriages are entered into, thus, from which also many descendants originate who are also not determined. These descendants then largely find no connection in their families, as well as not in the environment and in the society of their civilization. As I know, you designate these non-determined descendants as descendants of overpopulation. So this is Quetzal speaking. These are human beings who are produced thoughtlessly and through falsehood, and who become placed into the world, and who therefore cannot find their way in the world within a natural framework. Maladjusted youth who become terrorists and anarchists, for example. These then are those who operate illegally, who become terrorists and anarchists, and who want to turn the world and the social order upside down with murder, mayhem, and violence, or with sectarianism and fanaticism. And the more the human beings of the earth produce such not determined, non-determined, or unconsidered offspring, and bring them into the world, the greater the number of human beings of overpopulation, and with it the number of those who cry for murder, war, mayhem, revenge, hatred, sectarianism, fanaticism, terrorism, and anarchism, and who also manage it all. From this, it follows that with the number of the overpopulation containing not determined as well as irresponsibly produced descendants, this murder, mayhem, crime, sectarianism, etc. continue to grow steadily and tremendously, and cannot be contained. But these non-determined as well as irresponsibly produced descendants also include those flipped out ones who are abnormal, or who have fallen to euphoria, etc. Quetzal, it is necessary that I declare a guideline for this, according to which the earth human will be able to align himself, herself, with respect to her destiny for their life partner. So now they're talking about the regular human beings. Billy, well, if I may interrupt you, I have been troubled with this problem for 2 days, but unfortunately I only had as a guide the data on K, that woman they were talking about earlier, which you mentioned to me. Thus, I have calculated my head off, I don't know if that's quite the right translation, and have achieved all sorts of results. I just hope that my calculations are correct. Quetzal, you have probably made miscalculations, because a calculation of this data is extremely difficult, and moreover, the values are variable depending on the total population of the planet. In addition, it is also true that the values are not uniform for all races. Billy, well, that's exactly what I have found out. Quetzal, well, now you make me curious, and I almost want to suppose that you have actually managed to do it. Nevertheless, that would be more than just extraordinary. Billy, good. Just do not laugh if I am wrong with these. My results are as follows. First of all, I realized that all values must be built on certain basic values, and that these, in turn, are associated with very specific star signs. Quetzal is aghast, and he makes all kinds of remarks that this can't be, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Billy says, then I will now continue on. So, calculating the time in one's life when the swinging waves start to begin to search out one's destined life partner, given ideal circumstances. So this is where Billy starts laying out his calculations for the various races, including all the way down to jungle-dwelling natives. Both he and Quetzal were referring to the general human being, as I stated earlier, not just those who are bound to the soon-to-be-ended Codex. It is implied that we all have, or had, kindred humans who were destined for us. These calculations were based on the age we would be when our subconsciousness begins to send out the swinging waves, these oscillating vibrations, to find and attract our future partner in an ideal world. At least at that time, in 1981, there still seemed to be some kind of possibility, even though we were still beyond the population, our ideal population of the Earth. Now, not everyone is going to necessarily choose to be in a relationship or be with someone or have a life partner in every life, or actually meet the one who is in their destiny. That's almost guaranteed, but does not preclude us from loving somebody, sharing a life, and growing old and evolving with another wonderful human being nonetheless. So here we go. Billy stating, for the white human beings of the Earth and their hybrids, or their mixes, the following values are in effect. These are the basic values that stand as age years. In addition to these, in each case, there will still comes the basic numerical value of a cabbalistic form between 1 and 9, which arises from the addition of the day of the birthday and the natal month, which are then added on to the numbers that you see in this chart. For example, say you have a male born August 11th, they would be a Leo. So you look on the chart, Leo male, their number is 23. August is 8, and 11 is another 1 and a 1. So 8 plus 1 and 1, 9, 10. The 10 reduces to a 1 as a cardinal number, and you would add that on to the basic number of 23 for the male Leo. So the number would be 24. We'll go to another example here so you can actually see it on paper. So here's one, a female born on the 16th of March. That makes them a Pisces. If you look in the chart, you look for a female Pisces. Their base number is 28. But because they're born in March, it's the third month of the year, and they're on the 16th. It's a 1 plus a 6. So you add those three numbers up, it comes to a 10, reduces to the cardinal number of 1. So 28 plus 1 equals 29 as the base computation. So then Billy goes through and states what is up here. He says, thus my list states that, for example, if a human being of the earth is born on the 16th of March and is female at the age of 29 years, she will be at the determined age to the right life partner. Although this may still take a shorter or longer time because the destiny swinging waves first become fully effective at this age. Thus, it can take 1 or 2 or even several more years before the effect of the cause is sufficient. Then he goes into the other races. For the yellow human beings, the following applies. And by this, I mean the Japanese and Chinese, as well as all other yellow-skinned human beings. It is also true for their hybrids. So you can pause, obviously, this presentation, look at the charts that pertain to your race. The next one he lays out here is the brown-skinned people. Those are Africans, Brazilians, Indians, and Islanders. So I must say that in Brazil, there's a lot of offspring that come from the Portuguese, and we're not brown-skinned anyway. It's all a mishmash. So he says, next follow the brown human beings, to whom I also count the Africans, Brazilians, Indians, and Islanders, etc., of all kinds. Next, we're coming to the red Indians. Then follow the red human beings, so the pure Indians and their hybrids, but to whom the so-called wild Indians and jungle Indians are not counted. These fall among the primitive peoples, which is what the next race is here, jungle-dwelling natives. Now notice that all these age groupings have all sort of been going down. Billy, but these kinds of human beings are mostly primitive peoples like pygmies, jungle Indians, so-called indigenous people like in Australia, New Guinea, and so on and so forth. Especially among the primitive peoples, it is striking that the basic values are sometimes very low, which I have thought about. Thus, I have come to the conclusion that indeed, the average life expectancy of a type of human being must play an important role in these determinations. But I have not tested or calculated this, but maybe you can give me some information about this, Quetzal. He said that is actually so. That the lower the life expectancy of a race to be calculated equals the lower the basic values to be seen in these charts. And I just noticed that for the races, the young to the oldest in these whole groupings of numbers are starts with the youngest, or the jungle dwellers, then the red Indians, the brown skinned, the white, and the Asian. So I also noticed some other interesting things, being sort of interested in star signs, etc., horoscopes and astrology. So I just thought I'd just break this down for people, that across all the charts, it was noticed that the ages are consistently with the youngest to the oldest according to all the star signs. So the youngest being the Sagittarius, as you can see there, it's broken down, Sagittarius, Libra, Leo, Aries, Virgo, Cancer, Capricorn, Aquarius, Taurus, Gemini, Pisces, Scorpio. I also noticed that the men are always 3 points or years older. And I noticed that the fires were predominant in the early ones, and all first 4 were masculine signs, and the next 3 were all feminine. Whatever that means, who knows? And the mutable, cardinal, and fixed were mixed through later on. But anyway, just a little bit of interest for others who are interested in the astrology to see if there's any kind of rhyme or reason for all of this. Moving along. Overpopulation plays its role here too, unfortunately. So, however, these calculations only have the correctness for the population of a 4.3 billion population. Now, 4.3 is stated in this contact, but later on in the actual charts we have that have the Plejaren statistics of what the populations were in given years, they say that's 4.6 billion. So you'll see later on we're going into it's either 4.3 or 4.6. Thus, adjustments need to be made to the base calculations if the populations are more or less than the 4.3. For each additional increase of 500 million in the human beings of the overpopulation, the basic value number increases by another 2 points or 2 years. So, or if we, now we're jumping into billions, each increase of 1 billion, we'd be adding on 4 years, which is interesting given where we are now. We'll get to that in a second. But for every decrease of 500 million, we can only hope, in the overpopulation seen from today's 4.3 billion figure, the value decreases in each case by 0.5, so by half a year. Billy goes on to say, if only the normal planet conditioned population of 500 million or more, precisely 529 million, was on the Earth, then all of the basic values would be about 4 points less, i.e. 4 years lower. In other words, 529 million is the optimal population for us, but at that point they were at 4.3. So that was a difference of about 3.77 billion, just rounded up to 4 billion for ease of explanation. So 4 billion equals 8 times that 500 million number they have there, or 8 times 0.5 of a year less, or 4 years to subtract. Thus 4 years subtracted off the base calculations in the charts if we were at an ideal population size. Here's just as a screenshot from our statistical page of what the population levels were according to the Plejaren, and just shows, here's our ideal population at what, around 1500 to 1600, 1601, somewhere between 1500 and 1700. That 529 was there, or the 500 even. And then of course we exploded from the industrial era. So in the year 1 to 500, we were just shy of 200 million. And as of the early 1600s, we were around ideal. And then up we went. World War I in 1914 to 1918, and the Great Flu pandemic took their tolls. And then World War II also between 39 and 45. Just an interesting little snippet on population. From 31 to 2012, 1931 to 2012. These two screenshots pretty much encompass everyone who's living today who would maybe be interested in this material. So it's just a quick way that you can look at where the population was when you were, maybe around your ideal destiny partner finding time, more or less. So if one was to pause here, you can get a guesstimate of what that might be. And you'd have to do those calculations. Here's some examples. So from 1931 to 81, these are all times when you will be minusing. So someone living between 56 and 60, according to that chart, you can see that the population was around 3050, 382, 081, so 3 billion and change. The difference between 4.3 billion in 1981 and that 3 billion back then was ends up with a subtraction of 0.5 per 500, or equals to 1.5 years less than what it was in 1981. So if you were around your 20s to 30s in those years between 56 and 60, that one could go back and look at retroactively. So as a population continues to speed up in its growth after 1981, we have this chart here for people from 82 to basically 2012, which would cover off anyone living now who's between the age of 10 and 40. So this would involve an addition of 2 years per every 500 million higher than the 1981 count. So for example, someone living in 1996, the population was 6,204,000,000, etc. The difference between the 4.3 and the 6.2 is approximately 2.9 billion years, or almost 6 times 500,000 units. Addition of 2 years per 500,000 equals 12 years that you're adding on from those 1981 base figures. Makes quite a difference if your base figure was 29 and now you're 41 or whatever. So, and here we are. This is the final figure from last year, 2021, and our population is at 9,248,000,000. Isn't that crazy? So take that 4.3 billion away from that, and then we're now 4.9, almost 20 years that one would be adding on to that chart. It's just ridiculous. So so at this point, I think these numbers are all rather just theoretical and really cannot be relied on anymore. But to that end, one of our FIGU friends here in Canada, Terry Chamulak, did up an interesting online calculator whereby somebody can input their birthday and their month of birth, and you have a quick calculation according to what the population was that you can look at there, and we'll include that little spreadsheet online calculator link in our information, our notes at the beginning. So just to sum up, we basically have to love the one we're with. So it's all kinds of different love, and we've created such chaos for ourselves with our explosive, unsustainable, and catastrophe creating populations that the possibility of finding our true destiny partner is very, very slim now. Between the phase shifting of our births and deaths and the sheer numbers of us coming too fast and creating offspring too fast, the resultant psyche damage to these children and the resultant lack of maturity, insanity, and all around ability to, carry on in any kind of cogent, conscientious manner, puts all these calculations really right out the window. It was interesting to explore them, the calculations, and to look into how the whole subject blossomed out of the previous calculations for those who were still in the Codex, and then to review the types of love that occur on Earth and the erroneous large part of humanity who are with their conceptions of what love is. Our high divorce rates, account for how erroneous everything is. We can only hope that humanity will return to sanity and start following the natural creational laws. Sometime soon will be nice, but no one's holding our breath. I think we have to wait about 800 years. If we can bring our numbers back to these sustainable ones again, perhaps then we will be able to come back and look at these calculations that Billy did in 1981 and utilize them. But for now, we happily love the one we're with. And we can strive for harmony, respect, peace, and freedom in that love. And that's it. I thank you very much for looking at this and staying through to the end. And all the best for now, Salome, Catherine.